What is the left's blueprint for socialism?
And my policies most closely resemble what we see in Norway, in Finland, in Sweden.
But it may be better to consult an actual expert, former Danish Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen.
I know that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy.
The major political parties on the center-left and the center-right would oppose many of the proposals of Bernie Sanders.
Scandinavian countries are capitalist in wealth creation, but socialist in wealth distribution. For Swedish historian Johan Norberg,
it's really not a way of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, which is the perspective or the hope of many American and European intellectuals when they look at the tax levels in Sweden. What we do instead is that we tax consumption. We have a 25% VAT consumption tax in Sweden, which means that the poor pay the highest proportion of that.
the Scandinavians don't soak the rich, they soak the whole society. Scandinavia is not the left's real model. So what is?
I now pronounce you man and wife.
Where did Bernie go for his honeymoon? Stockholm? No, Moscow.
You know, it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
Where did Michael Moore go to champion healthcare? Copenhagen? No, Havana.
The Cuban people have free, universal health care. They become known around the world as having one of the best healthcare systems.
This is not a normal Cuban hospital. This is.
This is the emergency room?
Yeah.
Doctor, how old are these syringes? That thing looks like it's from the last century. Do you have sufficient facilities to sterilize all these old syringes?
No.
Most of your shelves have nothing.
Nothing.
The hospital in Moore's movie is only for foreigners who can pay and elite members of the Cuban regime. So Moore is colluding with the Cuban socialists to intentionally mislead his viewers. How these progressive leftists idolize socialist dictators.
My friend, President Chavez. He is one of the most important forces we've had on this planet.
Like a sick Hollywood love story.
How long has it been? We can bring it back again. Anything to spend.
Yes, this is the left's real model, Venezuela. My wife Debbie was born in Venezuela. She now mourns that her once prosperous country is now in ruins. Many Venezuelans fled to America, like my wife's friend. Gabby Franco was the first female shooter to represent Venezuela at the Olympics. She showed off her skills on History Channel's Top Shot. She and Debbie are big fans of the Second Amendment.
One of the things that is, I feel, a parallel between the Venezuelan left and the American left is their obsession with gun control.
Venezuelan authorities has vowed to crack down on guns as a pillar of domestic security policy.
It's, you know, like everything starts with the lie. This is for gun violence control.
Safety.
And at the end of the day, how can people rise against the government when they are disarmed?
What's striking to me is the closeness of this gun parallel. But it's only the beginning of these parallels between the two countries. One of them would be identity politics.
Right, so Hugo Chavez won the election in 1999, and he was indigenous. Venezuela is a very multicultural society. It has Italians, it has Germans, but he felt like there were not enough indigenous people in government. It was too white for him. So he decided to demonize the white people in Venezuela.
Another parallel is the demonization of the rich.
Much of the attack of the rich was for those entrepreneurs making a living, selling goods and services. So he decided to put a stop to that, setting price controls. So it drove many businesses out of business and out of Venezuela.
What about wealth confiscation?
Hugo Chavez had his national television show where he showed walking down the street and taking any apartment or any house he wanted and giving it to the homeless.
And today, if you leave your home in Venezuela and you go abroad and you come back,
someone else will be in it.
For Ruben Barboza, the future looks bleak. Over the past 40 years, he's built up a thriving cattle and dairy operation in western Venezuela. But this month, Hugo Chavez's government expropriated 30 farms in the region, and his could be next.
I developed all of this using my own intelligence and my own labor. And now that everything is going well, the government comes along and steals it from me, strips me of my land and my ideas.
There are more than 100 people working here. If there is an expropriation, we're all going to be out of work.
let's turn to a different parallel, and this is the war on fossil fuels. How is it possible in a country that is so rich in resources that you would have electricity blackouts and gas lines for people to fill up the car?
Well, first of all, Hugo Chavez brought all his bureaucrats to take over. They had no idea how to run an oil company whatsoever. The American and British oil companies that were in Venezuela were basically run out.
All the engineers, everybody who knew what to do the job, they had to leave the country.
For fossil fuels, Hugo Chavez hated them, and he decided to do hydro energy instead. Venezuela had many, many droughts, therefore caused rolling blackouts.
Another parallel is the left-wing militants.
There's a group of criminals called colectivos in Venezuela, and they're very similar to our Antifa people here.
Colectivos got support from the government of Hugo Chavez, who work as the government's strong arm, intimidating and even killing members of the opposition.
Anybody raise their voice against certain ideologies of the government, they get terrorized by this group.
Le hago un llamado a los colectivos, a todos. Llegó la hora de la resistencia activa.
I grew up in a socialist country, India, which moved toward capitalism. And so India is doing a lot better. But Venezuela, which moved in the opposite direction from a capitalist society to socialism, seems to have crumbled.
This is how Venezuelans spend most of their time now, in line not for luxuries, but basics.
I moved from Venezuela to the Rio Grande Valley, and I thought I was moving into a third world country after coming from Venezuela because it was so wealthy. We had everything we needed and wanted.
It seems there's one class of people who are living pretty well. Who are they?
They're called the Chavistas. They're socialists. They kept their cars, they kept their way of life. They don't seem to have any problem with food shortage there. Hugo Chavez died a billionaire.
Under Chavez and now his successor Maduro, Venezuelan socialism started out as democratic, but quickly became authoritarian. Venezuela is where the Democrats are taking us, whether they admit it or not.
Today I ask every member of the Maduro regime, end this nightmare of poverty, hunger, and death for your people. Let your people go. Set your country free.
We've seen gun control as a socialist tactic in Venezuela. So how does the politics of gun control play out in America? Biden used to be a strong supporter of gun rights.
Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun.
Not anymore.
If I'm elected and I'm coming for you and gun manufacturers, I'm going to take you on and I'm going to beat you. I'm the only one who's done it.
And who does Biden want to work with on gun control?
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
They claim that guns are to blame for tragic events like this.
911, what is your emergency?
I think I hear gunshots.
Are you at the school?
Possible shots fired. 1200 building. I'm saying it's a male in a hoodie he could not describe with at least an AR-15, if not an AK-47.
I love you. I love you. It's going to be fine. Can you hide somewhere? Can you play dead?
My daughter has no voice. She was murdered last week, and she was taken from us. Shot 9 times on the 3rd floor. We, as a country, failed our children.
Andrew Pollack, a grieving father, has investigated the roots of the Parkland shooting.
There's not a moment that goes by that I don't think of her.
And your book is titled Why Meadow Died. Why did Meadow die?
They wanted to avoid and end the school-to-prison pipeline and end suspensions and expulsions. So they just wanted to stop holding kids accountable. In Broward, children were allowed 4 misdemeanors per school year without ever getting introduced to the judicial system.
Now, the shooter himself, he had a history.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. You're all going to die.
45 calls to this individual's house without an arrest. And this is after we already familiar with Columbine, Sandy Hook.
One of the things you say that I find very striking is the fact that the policies of the school had the effect of taking kids who were very disturbed and violent and classifying them, in a sense, as handicapped.
You could have a kid that's emotionally disturbed, or they call it oppositional defiant disorder. It's ODD, which is another word for like a psychopath that's a juvenile. And they label them special needs, and that's what makes them untouchable within the school district.
The man whose job it was to keep students safe was arrested today. Surveillance tape shows the school resource officer never entered the building as bullets flew.
In some of the video that I saw from the body cam, you can see a deputy getting out of his car, and you could hear the gunshots that could be killing my daughter, and he's taking his time going to the back of his car to put his vest on, and he never goes even in the building.
Do you think that if there was a coach or a teacher or teachers who were trained and armed, that your daughter might be alive today?
I know as a fact that my daughter would be alive.
What have you found the role of the media to be in covering these shootings?
They don't want to hear the truth, the media. And I almost feel like they gloat when there's a mass shooting. And that before the victims are even buried and the facts are out, they're blaming the president, or they're blaming the scary rifle. They want to attack the Second Amendment. That's their agenda. The Second Amendment means a lot to me now because, like I said, my daughter was on the 3rd floor and no one came to save her. A lot of times you call 911, it doesn't mean they're coming to help you. So why should I give up that right to defend myself